Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure. I'm RJ Kerr, your host, and this is our ongoing live stream where we are building a full campaign with Domain of Dread from scratch in real time, sort of showing you all the warts and all, as it were, of all the little bits and pieces and all the little tangents that go into the creative process. Today, we are picking up where we left off last week, where we are building out the town of Darkport, a village in which our characters are going to start their adventure after entering this domain of dread. And we felt that it needed some places, some things for them to explore, especially since it's probably going to become a location that they come back to again and again. So we wanted to take the opportunity to kind of build out some of the sections there. And so we're currently working in the brainstorming stage of brainstorming out all the different points of interest that might exist in here. And again, bearing in mind that if you're doing this for your adventure, if you're doing this for your party, you don't necessarily need to do all this work up front. You can invent a lot of this kind of stuff as you go and as you play. But since we don't have a group of adventurers chomping at the bit to play this game yet, and we've got all the time in the world. We're kind of digging into the nitty gritty here and really building things out as fully fleshed as we can make them. So, without any further ado, why don't we go ahead and get back into our brainstorming section here? Um, and so, let me share my screen. I suppose we should take a little further ado and describe, if you're new to the channel, if you haven't been here before, that we are, like I said, building a domain of dread, ruled over by an elemental villain that takes place in and around an inland sea. And so this is a town that has been built in the ruins of a previous civilization. And so it's kind of a shanty town and feel in a lot of ways. It takes its living from this inland sea and is ruled over by a number of gangs that each control different territories within the town. And so, with that in mind, we're building out some of the various structures here. Um, so I was thinking that maybe today we could start with some of the shrines. Um, I think that there would be religious places built up in Darkport as people try to sort of seek refuge from kind of the horrors of life. When we think about other domains of dread, things like Barovia in the Ravenloft setting. There are still churches, there are still places of hope and um, or of darkness, depending on what kind of deity you worship there. And so I think it makes sense that we would have some of those here in Darkport. The first one I think that kind of jumps out at me would be, I'd say, uh, sanctified or dedicated to is more what I'm looking for there, I think. Dedicated to this elemental villain, this entity that rules over this domain of dread. I think there would be a tendency to deify that being, and uh, a tendency to view them as sort of all powerful and therefore worthy of worship. But we'll need some other ones. Let's see here for Jonathan Frost already in the chat. He's got some ideas for us. Wonderful. I like these. Deity of storms, deity of bountiful fishing, deity of hope. Yeah, stuff that would sort of um, both, counter represent both the duality of this existence here, the danger of where they live, and then a deity that represent the hope of where they live. I think is useful for sure. A deity of storms, I think, kind of leads into this elemental villain that we've kind of been talking about here. I think that would kind of take storms would be sort of their domain. Um, let's see. So let's before we start losing some of the threads here, let's start jotting some of this down. So let's say shrine. Let's see, to elemental villain, which doesn't have a name yet. So I think we're gonna make a note here, and we're gonna do our TK editor's note there because we need to name this villain, and we should probably name it sooner rather than later, but not necessarily at this very moment. And then I think we need a shrine to a TK deity of hope. I think you're right on that one, Jonathan. We need something that is um, a being of light and hope. And then we need one that is to TK deity of sorrow or pain, is something along those lines. That represents the danger, the difficulty that exists in this world. Um, the kind of the way that I envision this, and this is just my thought process on this. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Is that we kind of have, um, you know, we kind of have this sort of neutral, in a lot of ways, entity. And by neutral, I don't mean that they're not um, a force of evil. I mean that they are um, they're universally evil. There's no favoritism here. Like it's maybe this feeling of the sense of that it's a random sort of evil. It's you know, hates everyone equally sort of ideology. There is kind of what I'm thinking, is sort of along that neutral band there. Um, Whereas we've got one that's more good aligned, and then one that's more, let's say, I don't want to even say good. Let's say lawful aligned. One that's more, um, that's a little bit more orderly. I don't want to assign necessarily good and evil tags to this per se. I want to give us some more wiggle room than that, and then we'll say, chaos for our pain and sorrow, and more of the discord that comes out of that. And maybe sorrow and pain aren't the right adjectives here for this. Maybe we want something else. But we're looking for a deity that encompasses a large swath, I think, of societal woes. A light and a dark, a yin and a yang, two that are sort of complement each other, and then one that is this entity in the middle somewhere. Sometimes give it, sometimes take it away, much like a storm, right? Um, so that is my very rough thought on this at the moment. I think I want to chew on our elemental villain a little bit here for a minute. Kind of see what we come up with for them, because they're an idea that we came up with early on in this process, and have built out. Done very little to build them out, but we know that they need to exist, or maybe they don't need to exist. But I think they need to exist as part of this. We need a ruler of this domain of dread, and a current power. So why don't we chew on them a touch here? Why don't we learn a little bit more about them? And so I kind of see this as, we said, neutral, favors no faction, bringer of good and evil, ruler of storms, storms and destruction, And when I say bringer of good and evil, I mean kind of like, a storm. A storm has a lot of destruction that comes with it, but then there's, a refresh that comes out of nature afterwards, right? And so I think that you could, even though we have this squarely as a villainous character, a villainous entity, um, the people I think who sort of deify this villain would search for the quote unquote good in them. What is it? What's the positivity that comes out of them? I think very much like if you've played any of the Baldur's Gate kind of stuff, you think about Char, and the way that people like Shadowheart talk about Char, that Lady of Pain and Loss. It brings clarity, it brings focus. There's almost a peace to that. Um, and the way that they kind of view these things that are seen as traditionally negative. And I think that the people who deify this elemental villain would be very much the same kind of way. Um, they would be looking for the harmony in all of this destruction and all this chaos. Um, at least that's kind of where I'm going, where I'm thinking along the lines on this. Again, always love to hear your thoughts on this, so please feel free to jump in if you've got some opinions. Um, but I suppose outside of the idea of what we project or what the followers of this elemental villain would project onto them, maybe we should come up with who they are. Um, let's see here. Jonathan, Storm Translations. Ooh, some names for us here. Yeah, always fun to use names from different languages for these. Let's see here. Storm Translations, Jonathan says, is Procella in Latin. Let's see here. Ovadar, Swedish, and Miraka, Finnish. Ovadar jumps out at me. I like that. I like that. So why don't we use that as our working name for this? Ovadar. Trying to Ovadar. Elemental deity storms. And let's update our NPC and monsters roster here so that we are tracking that they are the same thing. All right, so let's jot down some ideas here. Let's say that Ovadar, and I'm probably slaughtering the pronunciation of that actual word, FYI. So if anybody actually speaks Swedish and can correct me on that, I would love that. Languages are not my forte. I've never picked them up easily. Jonathan says, "Can the Lord be placated? Sacrifices, if not, do the people here try anyway?" Um, I imagine. I think it's a really good question. Imagine that with the capriciousness that I envision here, that yeah, I mean, you do enough to, um, you do enough of something, they might just get bored trying to, hammer you down, or maybe they want to give you a little bit of hope, and so they pull back only to come back harder another time. And none of this is communicated by Ovadar, I would say. I think that there's sort of a fickleness to the destruction and the damage that it inflicts. Um, and as it kind of waxes and wanes, it's easy to assign, like, well, we offered this kind of sacrifice this time. Clearly, that's what Ovadar wants. We have got to do this more often to prevent these storms. Um, and as the more I think about it, this could be almost kind of a game to Ovadar. I mean, they're trapped in this world doing things to amuse themselves. Playing with the populace this way might be how they keep themselves from going, well, I'd say completely insane, although, I guess it depends on your perspective. But before we get too far down this, let's jot down a couple notes here as we capture what what we've kind of been thinking here um, is the fickle deity of storms, who is trapped within this, who's trapped within and rules over this domain of dread. They are the great evil that persists here, and they amuse themselves by playing the part of a deity who wreaks capricious destruction upon the people trapped in the domain of dread. Okay. Let's see here. So that's sort of our statement of who they are. Now let's talk about what the religion that's kind of sprung up underneath them is. And it comes back to, I think, Jonathan's point about, whether they can be placated, what are the rites and rituals, sacrifices that are used, that kind of thing for this sort of deal. So let's say trapped within the power, let's say within Ovadar's power, some have come to deify this ancient evil, and worship them as a god, which is repetitive of me to say, but I'm not going to go back and delete. A shrines to Avadar have sprung up all over the domain of dread, with one of the largest here in Darkport. No one really knows what it is that drives Avadar, but that doesn't stop people from trying to decode his actions into a codified religious, religious commandments and decrees. I'll say sacrifices. Sacrifices are thought to appease Avadar, though the exact nature of preferred sacrifices is unknown. This leads to much speculation and experimentation, ranging from, I'd say, probably from simple sacrifices of like food stuff to maybe even human sacrifices, just depending on how severe. I could see people when they don't know what their quote unquote God wants, throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, trying to see what sticks. Um, yeah. All right. So we've got this deity of storms that we're working with here, Ovatar, who is just a real evil character, um, and the entity that this domain of dread was created to trap. What would the church, what would the shrines that rise up to him, what would they look like? Do we think? What would the physical place be like? Um, would they take the shape of rolling waves? Would there be thundercloud iconography, lightning bolts? What do we think there would be? Would they be made out of? Um, yeah, would they be made out of whale parts or constructed from things that come from the sea? Um, I don't know. Let's see here. Jonathan says some things to consider associated with storms: shutters, weather vanes, lighting rods. Yeah, yeah. I think. Hmm. So that's brings up an interesting, or I should say that sort of jogs an interesting train of thought. Um, when I look at that, um, you know, the idea of lightning rods in particular kind of sticks out to me. The storms with their thunder, their lightning, their electricity, the tumult, that kind of deal. Um, we see thunderbolts in a lot of iconography for major deities throughout all sorts of cultures throughout the world. Um, and that's because that's what we could see from. That's how that storms present with lightning bolts, right? We see those things. So we might want to ask ourselves real quick: how does Ovatar? I keep trying to put an N in there, don't I? Ov- uh, how does Ovatar uh, present? How do they appear to the people in this domain of dread? Are they? I mean, what do they physically see? When you see Strahd, you see a you see a vampire, and occasionally when they manifest as the weather, Strahd appears as a storm cloud with the face of the vampire on it, or something along those lines. But I but we don't have Ovatar down as a vampire or as a dragon or as something along those lines. So, what is Ovatar specifically? Um, what is their actual true form? Um, let's see. Jonathan says Ovander is a good permutation of the base word. Thanks. Maybe we'll go ahead and we'll do that one. Just so that when I continue to mispronounce it, it's actually correct now. I appreciate that, Jonathan. Thanks for having my back on that. Um, and we'll correct that as we go through. But uh, let's see. So I imagine Ovander as sort of like a celestial serpent, a coiling, roiling mass of storm clouds that form a worm-like sort of entity in the sky. Um, that's the vision that I see. But maybe Ovander should be something else. Maybe they should be a storm giant, or a another entity of some kind. How do they manifest? When one of Ovander's storms comes in, what do the people see? Because that's gonna affect the kind of iconography. That's gonna affect the sorts of things that we see in the church. Um, are they do they appear as a colossal dwarf in the sky? Is it a storm giant? Is it a dragon? Is it a celestial serpent? Is it a galloping horse? Um, you know, like almost like a nightmare, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, Jonathan says like a serpentine storm. That's cool. Lightning curling around winding, rolling clouds. Yeah, that's kind of what I envision. I want to say it's either in Volo's guide or it's in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, the first one. I forget. I'm not going to dig it out because I'm sure it's copywritten. It's probably a bad thing for me to show the image of it. But there are some Titanic elementals in there, and there is a picture of a serpentine storm of a snake made out of storm clouds in there, and that's kind of how I envision Ovander, at least in my initial ideas for them. Um, and I'm with you, Jonathan. Yeah, it makes me think of the Chinese dragons. Yeah, that same um, kind of swirling, that kind of elongated reptilian form um, is kind of the vibe that I get. So maybe that's the image, maybe that's the iconography, and so that would work into um, that would the kind of stuff that would appear in our shrines. Excuse me, have a little more water here. Um, so if we're good with that imagery, then let's jot that down. Vonder appears as a serpentine storm. And almost Chinese dragon like shape with roiling, curling, space in there, clouds and lightning bolts arcing around its twisting form. Jonathan says, I see devotees dancing and whirling with long trailing scarves or sleeves or ribbons. Ooh, yeah. Long trailing sleeves. I like that quite a lot. That gives us visions of what of what the actual like faithful dress in. Gives us the idea of what kind of NPCs we're going to find here. So let's say devotees dress in flowing robes of storm gray with electric blue and purple embroidery that flows or that say runs down their long, say overlong. Well, they're trailing sleeves, and we're going to use your original word, Jonathan. That was a better word than what I keep coming up with here. Down their trailing sleeves. Devotee rituals often include dance, say whirling dances that mimic the snake-like movements of the storm. Okay, yeah. So, snakes and lightning bolts are what we're getting in our iconography here, the sort of things that we're going to see around these shrines. Um, so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, there might be since this is a shanty town, and we talked about how it's kind of built out of the ruins of a previous town, and then there's lots of found materials in here. Um, a lot of things sculpt, sort of scavenged from the sea. Then, we could have, uh, you know, maybe awnings made of sea serpent skin, tan sea serpent hide, that kind of stuff. In here, we could have a lot of, uh, you know, um, sort of maybe draperies made from that same kind of hide or that kind of deal. Uh, since snakes are so important and so or is such an icon as part of this, we might have that snake skin kind of stuff or everywhere in here, or it might be used as a ritualistic cloth or what have you. Um, Maybe let's see here. Okay, so let's think about the shrine itself. Um, um, so I almost think that this is probably one of the better constructed buildings in Darkport. Maybe it was maybe it's a mostly intact building that was previously maybe even a church to something else, and has been converted over into this church to Ovander. Um, let's, yeah, I kind of like that idea. Um, Gives us a sense of history here as well. So let's say the shrine itself um, is housed within the walls of an ancient church devoted to a long forgotten god. And we can say, let's say deity, a long forgotten deity. And we say long forgotten, maybe it's long forgotten to the people here, but not necessarily long forgotten to the characters. Maybe it's a deity they're familiar with. But I digress. The shrine itself is housed within the walls of an ancient church devoted to a long forgotten deity. Um, the old iconography has been changed or should be replaced with images of lightning bolts and twisting serpents meant to represent Ovander. Let's see. Meant to represent Ovander. I'd say maybe the tall Gothic style windows are draped with curtains of tanned sea serpent hide. And do you think that torches, lanterns, stuff in here would be? I could almost see them having lanterns that were that light this sort of light this place, but the glass has been tinted to be either kind of blue or purple to kind of give that lightning flash sort of color to it. Um, So it's not the same kind of yellow light you would get in other places. It's more colored. Um, yeah, let's put that in. The lanterns used to light space are have glass tinted blue or purple to cast a lightning like glow throughout the shrine. Okay, cool. Gives us a little more atmosphere there. Snakes and lightning, that's a cool combination. Sometimes just coming up with bizarre stuff that kind of pairing it together and then coming up with a reason for why it goes together breeds some fun, creative, uh, yeah, just some fun, creative stuff as we kind of work through something like that. It's a cool place to it's a cool well to pull from when you're trying to think of stuff creatively. Creatively. All right, so I think we probably have enough on Ovander right now. At least for our brainstorming stage here. Maybe we should move on to one of our other deities. Um, I see kind of our deity of hope and our deity of sorrow as kind of, again, kind of yin and yang, opposite sides of the same coin, maybe linked together in some way. Um, Kind of, and maybe this is a little on the nose as I kind of think about it here. Maybe it's a little too close. But like in Curse of Strahd, you've got Mother Night and the Morning Lord, right? And so you've got night and day are kind of the two sides to that coin there, um, and so they're kind of in many ways linked deities. I kind of think of these the same sort of way. They're linked in the same sense, but I don't know that I want them to be night and day representative necessarily. That's probably a little too close. Um, but we might think of things that uh, you know that are linked in the same kind of way to represent these, and maybe we go with hope and sorrow. Um, Twin deities, yeah, they could be twins. They could literally be twins. I'm thinking of them linked in some capacity, but making them twins is kind of a cool idea, I think. Um, and Because we've got to think of a way that these religions was kind of spring up into this world, um, and whether these religions would actually have any power or not, whether these deities actually exist or have any influence, or whether there's something else, and this is all just either false belief or warlock pacts and not actually divine magic, and hard to say. But yeah, we could make them actual twins if we wanted to. Um, hmm. Hmm. Because I kind of think about again coming back to the idea of Mother Night and the Morning Lord in Barovia. They exist. People worship them as though that they're real, but they really don't have any power or any. They don't manifest in that domain of dread. They're almost um, they're like a prayer in the dark. Um, you know, they're kind of they're there. They make people feel better, but they don't actually have a whole lot of influence. Um, and I kind of imagine that these deities are the same sort of way. They're things that they're what drowning men cling to in a storm, right? But they're not necessarily going to save anybody. At least that's kind of how I come to them. Jonathan, let's see, says depicted as perpetually wrestling when hope is advantage, boons occur when despair is advantage, misfortune Yeah. Despair, hope and despair. All right. Deity of hope, despair. So we'll need names for them. Um, hmm. What would they be? What would be? Would they be depicted as humanoid? Would they be depicted as anthropomorphic? Would they be, um, wrestling could be all kinds of things. They could be two wolves. They could be, um, other kinds of creatures, or they could be people. Um, hmm. Hmm. I feel like probably making them or probably making them humanoid in form, instead of making them animalistic. Um, just because if they've been kind of invented by the people here, people are going to kind of, um, associate them with themselves. Um, okay, so let's see if we're going to make these twins. Let's make this one shrine that is kind of it has a dual purpose here. Um, so we're going to say shrine to TK deity of hope, and then we'll say and to our TK deity of despair. And we're going to say this one shrine encompasses the faithful of two twin deities representing hope and despair, as opposite sides of the same coin. They are locked in an eternal struggle between their two ideologies. There we go. Ideologies. When hope has the advantage, people believe good fortune follows, and when despair has the advantage, misfortune is not far behind. Images of the two wrestling are common among the faithful. And ritual wrestling tournaments are held to appease the gods. Okay, so I know I said I kind of felt like they should be humanoid. Now I'm kind of changing my mind. I like the idea. I'm really warming up to the whole two wrestling deities idea, and now I think um, um, it comes to I think we need something a little bit of a twist in there to add a little extra flavor, so it's not just two wrestling dudes. Um, who are hope and despair. but maybe they need to be, um, anthropomorphic animals in some capacity, or you know, a bear and a dragon or something along those lines. Um, so we get just a little bit more flavor in there. Um, so Jonathan says, "I've been looking for words in Google Translate and coming up with nothing good." Yeah, sometimes, sometimes you just it's a that well doesn't comes it comes back dry occasionally here. Um, yeah, and it says maybe find a name that sounds good and then spelled in reversed also sounds good. Yeah, yeah, that's a fun little trick. You also can do the thing where for fantasy names where you find the word that you want to describe them, and then we change a couple letters in it, um, and you know I don't know if it'll work for hope, but despair we could make the E Y, and you know change around some of the other words there, so it's very close, but it sounds just a little bit different. Um, we could do that. Um, it's okay. I'm not as worried about getting their names down just yet. Um, um, if we let's see here, Ovadar. So Ovander's base is from Swedish. So maybe if we come up with find some words in Swedish that sound interesting that are kind of along those lines, and we twist them just a little bit, we'll come up with some cool names for this that'll sound thematically um, more similar. Um, that's one way we could approach this. But for the most part, for the moment, I should say, I'm really kind of interested in what how these two deities are represented. As wrestling forms, I really like that idea of them in that constant combat. Um, I kind of now need so now that we've talked about kind of how they're the same, now how are they different? What separates them apart in sort of their imagery? Um, what is it? Are they just two very different looking people? Are they wrestling animals? Are they you know people with animal heads? Are they animal bodies with people heads? Are they something completely different? What what exactly are they? How are they represented in their shrines when people picture them? Um, you know, his one an angel and one a werewolf. Hard to say. Um, I kind of want to come up with an idea though. I keep coming back to we've already got one kind of serpent deity, so I don't want to make like one of them like a snake. A dragon is probably too much. Um, but maybe we can come up with some kind of um, hmm, we can come up with some kind of animals that would encapsulate hope and despair, um, and then we can twist them. Maybe when we talk about them wrestling, maybe they're actually birds. Maybe one's a raven and one's an eagle. Um, maybe um, I just where I'm coming from with this, what's kind of sticking in my head on this, it makes me really kind of focus on this, and maybe vocalizing it will help kind of formulate it better. But I'm imagining these ritual days of wrestling, these ritual wrestling tournaments, right? Where they're doing this to appease their gods, and so you would have the faithful would all come together and they divide up into teams, and one team would be ritually representing hope, the other one ritually representing despair. So how would they adorn themselves? You know, what would they do to ritualize um, the to make them a depiction of their deity? Um, let's see here. A dove is a symbol of hope. Crow or raven might be an omen of misfortune. Um, yeah, so maybe it's a dove and a crow. Um, and that's the imagery is, and again we can kind of like, ooh, I can almost see the icon for that, where you have them kind of uh, you know, talons locked in the center, kind of twisting around one another, and you almost get that yin yang symbol going on there, is the two bodies, the white and the black, kind of arc around each other. I like that. That's a cool little icon that we could describe very easily in world, and has a lot of flavor to it. Um, so, um, gods are depicted as a wrestling pair of, as a wrestling dove and crow, locked in eternal struggle. When ritual tournaments are held, one side paints and decorates themselves as doves, the other side as crows. Okay, so now we come to the description of the actual shrine itself. And perhaps we want to save that for next time because we're getting close to our end here. Unless we've got any quick ideas we want to toss in here. With birds being kind of um, the icon here, I imagine perhaps that there are. I wouldn't say that the roof is open. I don't necessarily say the shrine is roofless, but it probably has many openings along the sides where birds can come and roost in the rafters, perhaps. Um, Seabirds in particular would be something that we'd get a lot of in and around this inland sea. And so yeah, so maybe they have skylights that are kind of opened up and birds can come in. That's one way to frame that, skylights. Um, uh, or they might just have open vents, creating kind of a natural aviary, natural entryway to this sort of this aviary. Yeah, it's a good way to frame it there, Jonathan. It's a good idea. That kind of accumulates in the rafters of this. So let's get that captured, and then we can and then we'll wrap up here. So let's say while the church is not open roofed, it does have many openings near the rafters to encourage local birds to seek refuge and roost above the congregation. The actual structure has an open, airy feel to it that I'll just say an open, airy feel to it. And frankly, if they've got a whole bunch of birds roosting in the rafters up above, there's going to be a fair amount of bird shit in in and around this place. So we could say the faithful, or I should say devotees, are often occupied cleaning up bird droppings throughout the days and nights. Again, gives us a little bit of flavor there. Cool. All right. Excellent. So we just developed two whole new religions. Actually, well, I guess technically two. An argument could be made for three, but technically two. Whole new religions today. So I'd say that's a pretty good hour's worth of work spent here. Thank you all so much for chiming in and your ideas as we go through this. Your support uh, as we build out this domain of dread. Especially thanks to Jonathan Frost for really turning out and representing today with some excellent ideas. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I really appreciate all the input and the feedback that you put into this adventure. There's a lot of you in here, and some of the in some of the coolest places. So thank you for your assistance. Um, as always, if you've enjoyed this stream, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that kind of stuff helps my channel grow. And if you are joining me on Wednesdays, I do another live stream where it's kind of chit chatty, where we talk about TTRPGs, about running them, about being game master and player and what have you. And really, it's kind of an open format kind of vibe to it. Always looking for new topics on that. So if there's something in particular you want to chat about on a Wednesday, send me a note. Let me know, and I would love to make that one of our topics. So anyway, thanks again, and thanks for joining me this Monday. I will see you if you see me on Wednesday. I'll see you the live stream there. Otherwise, I will see you this coming Monday on the 20th. And just a heads up, we'll have a stream on the 20th. I am on vacation on the 27th, so we will not have a live stream that day. So come join us on the 20th, and then we're going to skip a week, and then we'll be back after that. All right. Thanks again, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you next time.